Tipp FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Yeah, listener was on, following on that chat with McMorran there of hotline.ie. Listener on to say there's many things you can do to protect your child on a smartphone. They can be monitored, screen time, tracking, etc. I think children that start secondary school need a phone these days for safety reasons. So I suppose that's a pretty valid point as well. But I think, in fairness, Mick's point was, kids of 7 and 8 are kids who are under 10. Do they really need full 5G access to the internet? And I think most people would say, I don't think so.
Legal discussion on Tip Today is brought to you in association with Lynch Solicitors Clonmel, on the web at lynchsolicitors.ie and at divorceinireland.com.
Rosemary Lynch is with me in studio. Good morning to you, Rosemary.
Good morning.
Good to see you today. You're going to talk to us about farming, I suppose, and succession largely, is it?
Yeah, I think that everyone really has concerns around what's the best way to get their assets to their loved ones, whether that's during their lifetime or on death. And in a farming context, there thankfully is some reliefs available that might not necessarily be available to the average person.
Right. This is tax relief, is it?
Tax relief, yeah. So there's the two certainties, death and taxes, but one certainty I found is that people aren't necessarily very aware of the tax position on death or during lifetime. So there is one that frequently actually comes up outside of the farming type query, but in a general transfer, which is, a parent wants to transfer a house that they have to their child. They come in, they say, look, I'm not going to charge them any money, so it's a voluntary transfer. And I say to them, okay, well, unless we can find a relief available to you, you will be taxed as if you're selling it for value, and that's called capital gains tax. All right, and the hint there is in the name. It's supposed to be a tax on gains. So just to, I suppose, put it into context. So if you bought a property for 100,000, you sell it for 200,000, or you transfer it to your child when the market value of it is 200,000, even if you don't receive that 200,000. Revenue will say that you've made a gain of 100,000, all right, and you're taxed at 33%. Now, there are a few bits and pieces you can take out of that, thankfully, even on a standard one, right? So, obviously, when you buy a property, there's things like stamp duty payable, there's a solicitor involved, there's all those types of things. You can take out those costs, and you can also take out the costs of transfer at the time. So now, the today's transfer.
But it still will be a substantial sum.
Still a substantial sum unless you can find a relief available. Now, there is an annual exemption, but it's just over 1,200, so it doesn't have a big consequence. But there are some general exemptions available to, or reliefs available to, the non-farmer. So a spousal transfer, for example. So a lot of the time spouses are just trying to, I suppose, tidy up their portfolio. I think I've spoken to you before about trying to mitigate disturbance on death, and one way to do that is to put property into joint names. All right, so then it passes by survivorship rather than having to take out grant of probate. You can also, as a parent, transfer a site to your child, provided it doesn't exceed an acre, and that they intend to build on it, and that it's not more than 500,000, which you'd hope that there's nowhere in Ireland that would reach that limit.
So that's while you're alive you can do that, is that it? Yeah. Okay, right.
There's also principal private residence relief, so that's where it's your sole and main residence. There's a CGT exemption on that. And then I suppose there's another one that people aren't necessarily aware of, which is there's a small relief available to property acquired between 2011 and 2014. All right. So you're hoping when somebody comes into you and they're trying, their best to forward plan or to do something nice for their children, that you can try and fit them under one of those. All right. Now, as I said, farmers, there are, or to be honest, business owners as well, have certain reliefs available. All right. And one on this gain tax relief is called retirement relief. Okay. So it's, funnily enough, you don't actually have to retire to avail of the relief. All right. So it's a relief I suppose, based on two things really, and it's what's the relationship to the person you're trying to transfer your asset to. Okay, so if it's a child, niece and nephew working in the business or on the farm, you can transfer up to 3 million worth of farm assets or business assets.
Oh,
okay. Sorry, if you're 70 plus. Under 70, because there's obviously, they're trying to make it so that there's a transfer earlier, rather than
the
leaving
young
it to the
people
last
will,
minute.
will get involved, yes.
So actually under 70, it's 10 million. All right, so that's quite a good one to be aware of. And again, it's always about future planning, forward planning. You want to try and get, as the person giving the benefit to someone else, you don't really want to be penalised if you're giving it for less than value or for no value. And if it's somebody who's not related to you, you can also, give a certain amount without that tax catching you.
Is that just farming, or did you mention businesses?
Businesses
would have something
as well.
Similar? Businesses as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
Business and farming. Yeah, and then it's 750 if you are under 70. And then it's 500,000 if you are over. So that's kind of a good one to know about. How it's been, based on the queries I've been receiving, how sometimes it can get a bit sticky, right, is that you have to have used the business or the farm for 10 years, so actively farmed it basically. And sometimes actually when people are trying to tidy up their portfolio, as I just mentioned, by putting 2 people on title, if there's a non-farmer on title, that can actually cause an issue. So in that circumstance, you just need to come in and get the advice early, and then there might need to be an additional transfer before you can actually transfer it onto the child.
God, if there was ever an argument to getting early advice, this is it. I mean, you could miss out on enormous sums of money.
Absolutely, and it really is. A bog standard succession plan that we would do. Obviously, there's a good bit in it, but usually you can, say, all right, well, I can do all of this legal work within, the space of 6 months or however long it is. With the farming one, you tend to say actually that there's so many conditions and time periods to take account of, that you might actually see the solicitor or your tax advisor, and it might not actually all come to fruition for a period of 5 years or so, based on doing it in the right way.
Well, because it's so complex, is it?
Because
so many
I
strands to it.
Yeah, and I suppose, like, just talking generally about tax, there's always, if there's a relief available on a tax, there's always things that you need to be aware of, like the conditions. You need to put yourself in the best possible position to actually avail of the relief. So, on some of the farming ones that the recipient can benefit from the relief, they need to have a green cert, or they need to have a green cert within a specified period of time. They have to be actively working on the farm for 50% of their working time. So when you have a farmer that doesn't have necessarily a successor that is a current farmer, there's conversations that need to be had, and there's some movement that actually needs to take place, rather than just saying, okay, Grant, I tick all these boxes. It's not always the way that they'll have somebody that will meet those.
And I presume over the years you would have seen people make mistakes where this is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a mistake, but one of the things that I've seen happen is that clients come to me and they say, my mother or father needs to avail of a nursing home. They made a transfer to me of farmland or of whatever land, but it was a year ago. All right. Now, sometimes you can't mitigate that against that. You never know when somebody may or may not need to avail of nursing home support. But if you've kind of done it early enough that that is a consideration in the future, bearing in mind that I was listening to I think it was a Chagas seminar podcast the other day, and they said that the average age of a farmer is 59 at the moment, and that there's only 6% of the farming population under 35. So there can be, even when you don't think you're at risk of it in the next 10 years, that's actually when you need to be getting that advice, so that you're aware of what the future risk might be, because for the fair deal assessment, any assets transferred out on a voluntary basis within 5 years, it's a 5-year look back period, will be counted in the assessment. Okay, so again, that's the type of, I wouldn't call it a mistake, but potentially if there was more awareness earlier, it may not have occurred.
Yeah, this is telling me we have a small farm leased for 20 years, but have it willed to our adult children. Will they have to pay much tax where that is concerned? They don't farm.
Yeah, I mean
and a lease.
The lease can be good in a way, right? Because for the kids, what they really want to be, what they're concerned with isn't CGT. It's not that gain tax. It's inheritance tax. Okay, so each child. So the first thing you'd have to say is, I wonder what value that farm is, right? So each child has a tax-free threshold. It's a lifetime threshold. So again, have you given your children any gifts prior to that or during your lifetime, right? So let's say they haven't, okay? So that means that each child on death then comes into the equation with their full threshold of 400,000 each, all right? So depending on the number of children and the value of the farm, there may or may not be tax payable, all right? And that's without availing of any of the reliefs. Now, there is agricultural relief, and that again, just being clear, we've talked about gain tax, now we're on to gift tax, okay? And gifts are, during lifetime or on death. So agricultural relief can also be applied if needs be. So let's say it exceeds the 400,000 each. But that is a bit trickier. All right, so for your non-farming children, the assessment is, well, first of all, is it agricultural assets? Obviously, it's agricultural relief. It only applies to agricultural assets. The beneficiaries themselves, do they have 80% agricultural assets? Okay, and sometimes client goes to me, oh, geez, sure, they have a house now. But it's not, okay, well, they have a house now, so that means they have no agricultural assets. It's after they inherit. All right, you look at the value of the agricultural asset, the value of their existing assets, and you tot up whether 80% of that is actually the agricultural holding. And then you have the active farmer, and the querist just said there, look, my kids don't farm.
No.
But they do allow you a period of time to get the green cert in, all right, or to spend the 50% of your working time, or, interestingly enough, to lease it to someone who actually meets those conditions. All right, so it doesn't actually have to be the individual themselves. They can lease it to someone who would pass that test.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then that the farm has to be farmed on a commercial basis, which means for profit. There's other bits and pieces in that, but the big question that I would be asking, if I was acting for those people, is how much is it worth? Is there ever going to be any potential liability there? And then look at the reliefs.
Yeah, somebody's saying, this is really putting you on the spot here now, but any advice for a child buying a small few acres from parents over 70, was working it very part-time for the last few years?
What was the question, sorry?
This person, so obviously the son or daughter, buying a small few acres from the parents who happen to be over 70. The person in question was working it part-time over the last few years. So I suppose they're wondering about the implications of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, these types of taxes only arise if you use the word purchase. So they only arise if you're not...
You're gifted.
Yes, exactly, in a gift scenario. So yeah, if they're actively farming it, there are reliefs available if it wasn't a purchase, i.e. it was a voluntary transfer. So, I kind of mentioned already that there's the two main taxes, the ones that people are most concerned about, right? Inheritance tax or gift tax, all right, is the one where you might look for agricultural relief if your child is farming that already. That should be available. And, as I said, if they don't have the green cert, they have a certain amount of time to get it in place, or they have the 50% rule. The other one, actually, that people, anytime I am dealing with first-time buyers, they're horrified by it, right? And it's stamp duty relief, all right? Or it's stamp duty. And the question I would ask your querist really would be, what age is your child.
Right.
Because if they're under 35, they can get a good discount on stamp duty. Remembering stamp duty is a tax which is applied to documents, to the deeds. So you can't actually transfer or complete the transfer without paying your stamp duty. All right. So on agricultural land, it's actually 7.5% of the value. So
is it indeed?
It's a whopper. Okay. Wow. So the reason I was asking, well, I wonder what age your kids are there, is that if they're under 35, they can avail of the young trained farmer relief, okay, which would actually bring that down to zero if they do, have all of the conditions in place. So very similar again, right? They have to have a green cert, or they have 3 years to put it in place. They have to have a business plan submitted to Teagasc. They have to be registered for income tax, all of that kind of stuff. And then they have to, the clawback's always, you have to keep doing it for 5 years. There's also another one that I've come across recently, which is, so I want to transfer this parcel of farm to my child, but they're over 35. And then, so does that mean 7.5% is the stamp duty rate? But actually there's consanguinity relief, which is...
That's a big one.
it's a big one. And that reduces the stamp duty down to 1% as well, based on certain requirements. And again, you have the kind of active farmer test coming in there, and it has to be a lineal descendant. So there's a whole host really of considerations on both sides of the fence, because sometimes actually what I've found is that the parent, the farming parent, might be because farming is intergenerational, so they are particularly concerned with getting the land into the next generation's name. But sometimes the child doesn't have the funds for the stamp duty, and if they're not actively farming, they may not want to, take that on.
Yeah.
And I
can understand it too,
And they may just say, actually, if I don't have to pay stamp duty, why would I do it now? Why wouldn't I just wait till a death scenario? And then you'd have to bring back in the fair deal scheme, which is the farmer's main concern.
It's interesting, but I mean, it's in all our interests that farming would continue to thrive and flourish. It looks
Absolutely.
like that there's barriers put in the way some of the time. I mean, I know that there's some concessions and there's some, but there are barriers there as well, aren't there?
I think that I'm no big fan of taxes, but neither are my clients. But I think that there are more reliefs available to farmers and business owners than there are to other individuals in society. But the main conditions attached to any of the farming-based reliefs are that the recipient must be an active farmer, as much must be the donor, the giver. Okay, to avail of the reliefs. They don't want to, I suppose, they didn't want to introduce reliefs that you could say, okay, well, I, as the giver, am a farmer, but I can transfer it to whoever I like. They're trying to keep it in the farming context.
It's interesting. Is fair deal a biggie when you're talking to farmers?
Fair deal, to be honest, is quite a biggie to most clients, right? Because if you think about it, obviously, the farming client, their farm is their business, their farm is their life. Of course, they would prefer to see their child or whoever it is, niece or nephew, getting the farm versus potentially having a charge registered, and then whoever does get the farm on death has to sell some land to
pay off the debt.
But you also have like the average person who's, maybe inherited their family home from their parents, and they want to keep that family home in I suppose the family name. They don't want to put their child in a scenario whereby the asset may need to be sold to discharge the costs of fair deal. So it is a huge consideration, I would say, and it is one of the most frequently asked questions when I meet clients of a certain age, and it is very much, it is the reality. If you need to avail of a nursing home, if it's medically required, invariably you'll be going through the fair deal scheme. It's
interesting, Rosemary. So the main lesson from today is get advice and get it early.
Yeah, And it is one of those areas where, you know, you kind of need to even ask the clients what they eat for their breakfast, you know, because there's just so much going on. There's so many different reliefs. There's so many different conditions that you need to get the advice early, and you need to get all of your material prepared so that, you know, proper advice can be given.
Somebody saying, I'm planning on leasing the family farm from my brother who owns the land but doesn't farm it. He has it leased to a local farmer for years and was entitled to tax relief on the rent he received. However, he will now have to pay tax on my rent as he is a brother. Has Rosemary ever come across that particular scenario before?
Well, there are tax reliefs available on long leases. I don't know why, if tax was not payable on the first, it would be payable on the second, but I suppose I'd have to see the lease.
All right, okay. Great to see you as always, Rosemary. If people want to make contact with you or your colleagues at Lynch's, is there a number that they can call?
052 61 24344.
All right, well done. Sometimes I say that to people and they forget the number. Thanks, Rosemary. Thanks very much indeed. We'll take a break, back with more.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puckon. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.